Hello and welcome to the Giving Voice to Depression podcast, produced in partnership with the A.B. Korkor Foundation for Mental Health. I'm Terry, the creator and co-host of this podcast. I've lived with depression most of my life, and I know how easy it can be to feel all alone in the experience. I'm not alone, and you aren't either.
And I'm Dr. Anita Sands, a licensed clinical psychologist with a number of my own diagnoses, all of which bring a certain amount of anxiety and depression along with them. There is great power in shared experiences. We share our own as we engage in intimate and candid conversations with our weekly guests, exploring different perspectives on and experiences with depression.
We keep it real because depression is real. We keep it hopeful because there truly is hope, in spite of what depression tells you.
Hi, Terry.
Hello, Anita. So if you listened last week, you know that we're in the middle of a walkthrough of how to write a Wellness Recovery Action Plan, or a WRAP, to document the specific personalized skills and strategies that keep us well and feeling better. Our focus is depression and mental health, of course, but the plan works for all kinds of chronic conditions.
Mm-hmm.
The form we're using is available online for free. We have also linked to it with the show notes. It is an adaptation at getselfhelp.co.uk, and that's a site that provides cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT, resources. And this is an adaptation from the Wellness Recovery Action Plan by Mary Ellen Copeland, who created it. You can find it, print it out, follow along with us, or you can just Google or search for WRAP, W-R-A-P, Copeland, PDF, and guide, and something is going to come up that you can use.
And what's great about a WRAP is that it's an empty framework that each of us could fill in and tailor to your specific needs. Since at least when we're well, we know better than anyone else. Mm-hmm. We know how we function. We know how we don't function. Mm-hmm. So having it all written down and accessible means that when things get hard, you already have a plan, a customized plan for how to proceed. So you don't have to figure it out, and you can even have other people help you to get through it. Mm-hmm. So last week in episode 261, we talked about making a personalized wellness toolbox, making a daily plan, and identifying stressors or triggers and early warning signs that you may need to take some action to keep the situation from getting worse. So today we'll focus on the fourth, fifth, and sixth parts of a WRAP, and that's the signs that things are breaking down or getting worse, and then making a crisis plan, and then doing a post-crisis plan.
And it's interesting that you said, as a therapist, this is the work that you do regularly with your clients. And you thought that every therapist was probably doing this. And I shared that I've been in therapy on and off for decades and have never made a plan until I did it in preparation for this episode.
Okay. Well, since I sort of live my life making sure that I'm doing all of these things and I know how helpful it is, it's usually one of the first things that I suggest is, where's your notebook? Let's put all this information down so you don't have to try to remember it, especially when you're in a bad place. Mm-hmm. So that just has always made sense to me.
Mm-hmm. So if you're following along with the blank form, we are starting at the heading, when things start breaking down or getting worse. And it says, in spite of your best efforts, your symptoms may progress to the point where they're very uncomfortable, serious, or even harmful. However, there are still some actions that can be taken to prevent a crisis.
Right. I like to call this the point of some possible return.
Oh, I like that.
Instead of the point of no return.
Yes.
This is the point of some possible return. If we catch it and we jump in, we could reverse this or slow the roll.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So again, just like in all of these sections, there's the recognition piece where you need to figure out how you think and feel and behave when the situation that you're in has become uncomfortable or serious or even dangerous. Mm-hmm. And then the action plan for when things have progressed this far, again, caring for yourself becomes the top priority. Remember, I said on a bad week, the only menu that I look at is the self-care menu. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I do, is self-care goes to the absolute top when things start getting really, really bad. So you want to figure out what you can do to reduce the difficult, the unpleasant experience, prevent things from getting worse. And so you're going to be writing down in this section, what are the signs that indicate to you that things are breaking down? They're not just stressful, but they're breaking down or they're getting worse. And it really suggests we have to do something now.
Some of these are thoughts for me, whether that's the what is wrong with me that I shared in the last episode, or it's when I start having that why bother and what's the point thought. And I know that that's common because we've had a lot of our guests say that that's when they realize they're, at that point of possible return, as you call it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, I look for the trends. If I have had to cancel, on clients, if you've called in sick,
yes.
If you haven't slept well for 3 days, or that's all you're doing, that's all you want to do for 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
Your hygiene, if you're just like the idea of a shower is like, really getting to you, not responding to people. And then physical symptoms for me, since I deal with a chronic illness. So if I'm noticing a lot of changes in pain, energy level, fatigue, those kinds of things, that's all like, okay, it is still possible to reverse this, but this is the sign that things are breaking down or getting worse.
Mm-hmm. So the hope is that having identified a number of our available tools and resources and having taken notice of our early warning signs so we can use them, we've been able to keep ourselves well and safe. But it doesn't always work that way.
Right.
And sometimes, despite our best efforts, we can find ourselves feeling out of control.
So that's why, in addition to the early parts of the plan, the RAP also prepares for potential crises by guiding us to make a crisis plan in advance for us and also for others who are supporting us to follow. So as the form indicates, it says, by developing a crisis plan and sharing it with others, you will be able to take responsibility for your own care and instruct others on how they can support you during a crisis. Mm-hmm. So again, a crisis plan should be developed when you're well. As noted in the form, they take time to develop. It's essential that it's developed in collaboration with those that you're asking to support you so that they fully understand and agree to their role with the plan. So in this section, you're going to define and write down what a crisis looks like for you, and also specify who you want and don't want to support you, what specific types of support that you want or need from friends, family members, medical professionals, people at work. And it's a good idea to then provide a copy of the plan, or at least the relevant part of it, to the people that you've listed.
So in last week's episode, we talked about what wellness looks like for us. And I thought that was interesting because it's, again, I don't take note of things when they're good very often. But this time it's the opposite. We're being asked to say what a crisis looks like for us. Mm-hmm. And you probably have more experience because you have not only your own, but your clients as well. What are things that you would say are common signs of a looming, a pending, or an actual current crisis?
Okay, so again, rather than sort of a list, because everyone will personalize that list, but whereas before when we were talking about the section of things are breaking down and getting worse, and I said that's the point of some possible return, when you hit the level of crisis, it will begin to literally feel and look like it is a point of no return. Like, we haven't been able to slow the roll of things getting worse. And so now they're progressively and consistently just getting worse. And that might be in spite of anything that you've tried, or it may be that you now have actually lost the ability to try to make it even better. And so that to me signals we're in a crisis mode.
And it could feel so like if you were to write this down, which we're hoping you will, and share it with somebody, it can feel like, oh, I don't want to do that. Like, that's really vulnerable, or I don't want them to know how bad it gets. But if we take this out of the mental health realm for a minute, let's say you had really bad asthma. Mm-hmm. The people around you, the people on your team, or even just like your coworkers, your family members who you might or might not consider to be on your team, they need to know when you just need to sit down and catch your breath. You need to use your inhaler, or you need to go to the hospital. It's not just a mental health thing. There are times when our hearts hurt because we have heartburn, and there are times our hearts hurt, or I realize that's not the right phrase, but when we're having a heart attack, and there are different situations and they require different responses. So maybe a little bit of the charge can be taken out of the need for such a plan if we realize that we have them for other things. You, Anita, live in a hurricane area and you have things to cover your windows. I live in a floodplain and I have things to keep the water out of my house. So again, I'm just trying to normalize it a little bit because it can feel like, well, shoot, am I so messed up that I need a mental health plan? And yeah, probably. If you're listening to this podcast, probably.
Right. No. And again, when you're in the midst of a crisis, you're not going to really probably have the cognitive access to communicate as well to other people or even to know yourself what you need. And that's why having this done early is great. So when people are filling in this section, my signs of a crisis are, I would encourage them to use these prompts. If I say these things, if I start saying this or these things, if I start doing this or these things, or if I stop doing this or these things. And so fill in that as a prompt. For me, for a long time, my family thought when I said I'm feeling overwhelmed that I was just like sharing my emotional state. But actually that was my prompt for them that they need to go into support mode. So if I say I'm feeling overwhelmed, I don't share that casually. That is actually the very first thing that I'm going to say that actually clues in the people closest to me to know I'm going to need you to start stepping up and helping me figure out what to do. So for my family and my friends now, if I say I'm feeling overwhelmed, that's not just a statement. That's we could have a crisis going on here. What do you need from me? How can I help? Or if we predetermine things that you could do, like I'm off duty for even thinking about nutrition this week. Other people need to step up on that one. It's a great shorthand. And that's what this crisis plan can be, is the shorthand both for yourself and other people that, okay, we're in a place where people need to act and behave and do things differently now.
And I want to point out that you're saying I'm feeling overwhelmed is sort of typical of your gentle nature.
Yes.
Not everybody is like that.
No.
And in one of my support fails that I've only recently realized, having someone I was in a relationship with scream at me, just leave me alone, get the hell out of here. I took incredibly personally. And I, had that immediate response. Oh, I will leave you. Oh, I will leave you so alone. I will get the hell out of here. Had I recognized it as this man was really hurting, and I could have said, I will give you the space you need. But you're not alone.
Right.
And I'm not actually leaving, going away forever. I'm X minutes away. I will be in touch by text. So there's
perfect, because you don't damage the connection.
Yeah.
You didn't take it personally. But on that person's crisis plan, it should be, if I tell you to get the hell away from me and leave me alone, that's a sign that I'm in a crisis.
Exactly.
Because when else would I say that?
Exactly.
So that's a great example.
So then we want to list who we would like contacted in a crisis situation. That's their name, their relationship to you, and how do you get a hold of them, their phone number, email, whatever it's going to be. The RAP calls those our supporters. Given that many of us do not know our friends' phone numbers anymore, let alone our therapists or our doctors, since they just come up in our phones, having them written down is really important.
Yes, and there's also space in the plan to specify the kind of support that you'd like from each person, which could be anything from, taking care of your children or your pets, staying with you or helping you with transportation or set up for healthcare appointments, calling other people on the list so that, again, you don't have to do more than you're capable of in the moment. And then just as importantly, at these times, you need to note who you do not want involved in your care or treatment. And that could be because of past experience, or just it would not be helpful or beneficial for you to, for example, have anybody, maybe who you work with, involved in what's going on. You want to keep that private. So having it all written down allows you to maintain some control and hopefully trust that your supporters will follow that plan. And so even in a time of crisis, things will happen the way that you would like to see them unfold, at least to the best of everyone's ability.
Which is one way to keep control in what can be a very, very out of control time.
Yes.
And, so this, again, is actually a plan by you, for you. And it's kind of important to remember that because it can seem just like something you wish you didn't have to do. When you're making that list of your supporters, that's to include medical professionals who might be on your care team, your primary care physician, therapist, psychiatrist, care coordinator, whoever those people are. And it's good to make note of the medications and the dosages that you are currently taking. And just like the supporters, the people you do and do not want involved, this is also a place to write down the meds that you do not want or have had trouble with in the past or for whatever reason would like to avoid if possible, just to have that noted.
Yep.
Okay.
And since not all needed or desired support is medical, the WRAP plan makes space for listing a bunch of other types of things that we can do or others can do for us that could help reduce your symptoms or reduce the crisis and help you towards recovery. And this is where I feel like you can't get too specific in coming up with your plans. So you kind of want to go with what are your supporters' strengths? So if someone that you know really loves and doesn't have an issue at all making or getting groceries or, meals to you, then that's what you would ask that person. Is this what you would be willing to do? You want to try to put together the person and the thing and get really specific. I need you to text me in the morning and at night, or make a phone call or do a check-in with me. Listing the essential tasks that we need to kind of get this thing going in the reverse, get out of crisis and reverse it. Do you need help with some essential tasks? Do you need just again, this kind of encouragement and reassurance of your worth and your value, and some sense of hope that, listen, you've gone through this before. You've successfully come out of this. We're going to get you through this. It's going to be okay. Just knowing what you need, making sure that people know what you need and getting their agreement that they will help you with it in those specific ways is what really makes this plan work.
Mm-hmm. And when we're talking crisis, my mind doesn't go to meals. Mine goes to somebody to be here so I'm not alone, even if I don't want to be interacting, or someone to take me to the hospital or to my therapist or something like that. So it would need to be someone you trust to stay calm, someone who can take it, if you do, like my friend, yell at me, and understand it has nothing to do with you. So there are, as you say, you have to play to the strengths of the people that you're lucky enough to have in your life who do anything when you're in crisis. Yes. So, lots of us don't have a big pool to choose from, but, I have a neighbor who could drive me to the hospital, but I wouldn't want, other support from them. And so it is, as you say, a place to be really specific, and it's good for them to know what it is that you would expect from them. What kind of support would be helpful? Do you want me to hold you and let you cry? Do you want me to stay the heck away from you? Because if I start getting all touchy-feely, that is going to just make you worse. We all have different ways, and we don't know how we're going to respond in a crisis because it's a crisis.
Right. Yeah. And, asking your supporters beforehand, would you be okay with this if I needed this, if I were in a crisis? And I said, can you do this? And they're fine with it. Ask one of your other supporters, if you've got more than one, ask the other one, would they be willing to be a backup?
Oh, nice.
So that you have more than one option. Because I have seen it work where, we developed a plan, and if we don't have more than one person and that person's going through a crisis themselves, or they're unavailable, or, they're out of town, like here's this incredibly, best laid plan, and it's going nowhere now. So for every task or thing that you need done, have your primary person, and then, get their commitment. Yes, I'll do that. And then have your secondary person say, now I know you said that you're willing to do this. If my person who I've got on this detail can't do it, would you be willing to be a backup? And that way they know if you're asking them to do more than one thing, or you're asking them to do something that you normally don't, it's because I had a plan in place and that one fell apart, but here's my plan B. You're my plan B. Would you be willing to be that?
Yeah. We need as many nets as we can have at that point, right?
Yes. Yes. And again, building it into the plan means you don't have to think in the middle of a crisis, right. My plan is falling apart, because what's your brain going to tell you then? It's hopeless. It'll just escalate the crisis as opposed to help you feel like, okay, I can manage this. I can figure something out. You shouldn't have to be trying to figure out what to do in the crisis when you're in the crisis. You just need to, here's your plan. Here's your people. Here's your phone numbers. This is what they agreed to. If that person can't, let's go to the next one, and we've already got it all set up.
Right. So that plan B person can be given that task of saying, okay, plan A just fell apart. Part of your responsibility here is take it from here, because that's more than I can handle.
Yeah. I mean, that can be a part of your crisis plan is if my plan seems like it's imploding. Yeah. Who's the person who would be willing to sit with me and help me figure out other alternatives and options? That is a great part of a great thing to have as part of your crisis plan is if everything seems to be falling apart or not working, who would be willing to sit down and help me amend this and come up with some other options? Because again, in the crisis, you will not have a brain that is going to do a great job of figuring all of this out.
No, I'm thinking of how desperate you would feel at that moment if you were already at the point of crisis and then the people who were supposed to help weren't there. And you thought, well, of course they're not. They're not there because they don't care, because I'm not worth caring. That is just...
It gives depression. It certainly gives depression and negative thought processes all the data that it needs to then really run away with it and worsen the situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, just saying, okay, nothing actually, we've got this great plan, but just like most plans, none of them usually work completely perfectly, and that's okay. But yeah, a backup plan is, hey, my plan's falling apart and I really need help figuring out what to do next. Yeah. Get somebody to say, I would be willing to help you do that.
That would be so nice. We are going to shift from crisis plan to post-crisis plan, but we don't want anybody feeling like, well, wait, hey, that wasn't enough. You know, we're not presenting this as, we are giving you all the information you need to make a perfectly ironclad plan. We're getting you started, and you might want to do this with one of the people who's going to be involved in your plan, or with your therapist, or with a peer specialist, or somebody else. So again, we're just giving you ideas and getting this started, because I know a number of people, and I include myself in this, who have just looked at this and thought, it's one more thing to do. It's one more thing to be overwhelmed by. I got to the third step and I lost interest, or I don't see the need for it right now because I'm doing fine. Well, yeah, you don't need it when you're fine, but it's like having fire insurance. You know, you need it when you have a fire.
Exactly.
So, you know, the fact that your house isn't on fire isn't a reason to not have a fire extinguisher.
No, that's that personal responsibility, piece of this. But doing that actually helps you get the support that you need when you need it. But there's actually another little side benefit that I don't think
to tell.
Well, if you're sitting and doing this with someone who probably loves you, that's going to be my guess, is that they care about you in some way. If you're asking them to be a supporter and you're asking them to go through and create this plan together, it is such a benefit for that person who's your supporter to know that you've taken this time, that you've got this plan together. Because again, what do we do if we really care about somebody who's struggling? We start to worry about them. It raises our stress level. It's not a bad thing. I think it's important for us. It alerts us, hey, somebody's struggling and they need my help. But if your supporters know you've developed this plan, and they know it because they were a part of developing it, they were a part of saying, yes, I will commit to this and this, it actually reassures them when and if you do go into crisis, or if they worry about you going into crisis. It's sort of like we can say, like, yeah, nobody wants the house fire, but knowing that you have insurance is a really
and extinguishers.
Yeah. And yeah, all of the things that you would need. It does help with stress. So it's not just going to help you. It's going to help your supporters, because those are likely people who really care about you. And if they know we've got a plan, yes, we might need to revise it or do something else, but that is some really nice kind of insurance for them that if things start going badly, we're not just like, oh no, what do we do? I don't know what to do. It's like, we do know what to do. We do have a plan. You do actually have a role that you agreed to play. And it just kind of calms everybody down. And I think it's a positive for everybody.
Agreed. And when you say we do know, that's that agency. We do know. We're us. We have more information than anybody else on the planet. And if we leave it up to just, I don't know, fate, we know what can happen. And it can be, I'm feeling suicidal, which is hardly, the calm way we'd likely to say that. Someone might dial 911, the police might show up, and it might not go the way you wanted, and you might not be taken where you want, and you might be taken there in handcuffs. And there's all that element too. If you have a plan, you can avoid some of the potential, I don't know what word to use there, scenarios that can play out that would not be the way you want it.
That is pretty much the primary motivation for me making sure people have this kind of a plan in place, is because I have seen the negative outcome of not having one. And I don't want my clients to have to be sitting in an involuntary hospitalization unit when they're in crisis because somebody freaked out and they didn't know what else to do. We can develop plans that give you multiple options of care and safety, so that those things would be, last resort. And even our last resort for hospitalization, if we already have the place that you would be okay going and the 1-800 number for doing the screening, by phone, like you can have so much more control over what can happen, even when we do need to let go of some control and let other people help you.
So you just said the 1-800 number for screening by phone. I don't know that. Do you mean the crisis line?
No, I'm talking about, like, if I needed to be hospitalized, I would be okay going to this place or this place. Okay. Or if I needed extended intensive, outpatient or inpatient hospitalization, this place or this place. And then you look it up, find out what their 24-hour 1-800 number or 888 number is.
I get it. Okay.
So that, you can actually start the screening process at a place that either is good or you've heard is good or you have had experience with. And then you just took control over, okay, I know I need that level of help, but I'm going to be voluntarily contacting them and setting up that screening and getting in. And you can even check to see which place you would want to go and do they take your insurance. You can do all of this stuff at a time when you're well and not have to be thinking, oh my gosh, I need a place to stay to be safe, but I don't know what's in my insurance. I don't know if it's good. When you're well, you've got the time to get that information, and that becomes a part of the crisis plan.
Okay, good points. So we are shifting to the final section of the WRAP plan, which is the post-crisis plan. And that's when you're out of crisis, you're returning to your daily plan on the timetable and in the way that makes sense for you specifically.
Part of this is reevaluating the plan that you write before the crisis to see if there's anything in it that you want to change for the future based on the most recent experience of having the crisis.
So here's where you list the positive changes that indicate to your supporters you're in control of things again and that you no longer need to use the crisis plan, while also making space for listing support that you may still want or need while coming out of the crisis period. So I think that's important because somebody has to know, like, when can I stop worrying? When can I stop being, your crisis supporter? But we also don't want to be like, okay, thanks, bye. It's like, but still check in on me. Or when you brought up meals, I'd love to have a couple in my freezer because being in a crisis, that is put everything else, every other adjective out of the realm for the second. It's exhausting. And when you come out of it, you are spent. And, it would still be nice. You're
still in recovery.
You're still in recovery.
Just because you're out of crisis.
Absolutely.
You're taking first steps out of it. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So, I even sort of have a little rule of thumb that I'll ask people to consider. Because remember, we want to communicate to our supporters that we're in crisis by saying things like, if I'm saying this, if I'm doing this, if I'm not doing these things, that's I'm in crisis. So you want to look at, again, what would be the opposite? If I start saying this instead of this, if I start doing this instead of that, if I stop doing this, because doing this indicates I'm in crisis. So when I'm able to stop doing that, that can help. And, again, for those early warning signs in crisis where I said, we've got the 3-day data point is a trend kind of rule of thumb. For me, we want to lengthen that so that we don't want to say, well, this person's had a couple of days and they're saying these positive things and they're doing these positive things. I usually say, look, make it a 6-day or more trend of having to see those positives before your supporters start kind of taking that step back or questioning if we're out of crisis. Because sometimes what can happen when you're in crisis is, as you know, you can just get to a place of hopelessness and switch into, oh, everything's fine. We start pushing people away. You kind of get a sense maybe this could lead to hospitalization and I don't want that. So everybody sort of knows the things that they need to say that would maybe get people not worrying about them, but it isn't real. So I tell supporters and actually write it into this plan, your supporters need to see the positive stuff happening for a lot longer than the amount of time it took to communicate that you were in crisis. So don't step back as a supporter, or maybe that you write that into your plan of, even if I look like I'm doing pretty well, I would like a check-in once a week for a month or two. Just to make sure that I am trending in that upward direction of recovery and not getting stuck or stagnant. Because if you start feeling like you're stuck, again, a person who's depressed is going to start thinking, I'm a downer, I'm going to overburden or burn out my supporters, and then you just stop asking for the help that you need. So again, we want to prevent that by making it really clear to supporters what are the signs of actual improvement, not fake or, that kind of like, I'm fine.
Get off my back improvement. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So that can be written into the plan too of, look, I may look like I'm doing a lot better, just because I got some reassurance and, people were coming to my support. But if everybody goes, oh, well, this person seems to be doing better and then backs off immediately. Again, you're just in the early stages of trying to recover from a crisis. So you still probably need a lot more support than you think you need and that you probably want to ask for.
Okay, so we know this episode and last week's were longer than usual, but this is important because this is one of the ways that we can protect ourselves. And it also makes it so clear on how others, when we're always saying, help us out, step in, we can't do this alone. We make it clear how. And that is going to be a lot better than having someone guess because, God forbid, you're near a crisis and somebody says, come to my Zumba class. That is not the time for that. And I probably won't include that. I'm just going to shift and read this now. Okay, before we close, I want to read what we considered an important note from RAP at this point in the plan. It says, there may be times that even with yours and others' best efforts, you still experience a crisis. This is not the end of the world, nor does it mean that you will not recover. Recovery is a process, and it's ongoing. You can start again at any time and after any difficult experience, no matter how bad. However, it may be very helpful to reflect and think about what has happened to help you learn from it. Some people feel this is good to do alone. However, many of us are greatly helped by having someone we trust to turn to talk it over together, and to get their thoughts about what happened too, because we only saw the experience from our own perspective.
Yeah. And again, after a crisis, you may feel really, really worn out. So you choose the time when you're ready, such as when you feel like you have more energy and ability to think about this and work with a supporter to try and make sense of what happened, get their input as well. You talk and think through what happened. You compare it with the RAP that you've written so far, and then you can make the adjustments. You can write a better RAP for the next crisis.
That you hopefully never have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we should talk about where you keep it. You want it to be somewhere that you can access it. You want it to be clearly marked if someone else needs to access it, and make sure that the people who are a part of your plan have at least the part of the written plan that applies to them. If you're expecting someone to make phone calls to your, say medical professionals, they're going to need to have those numbers and not come to you for them at that time.
Right. And just like we're lowering expectations to match reality for ourselves, if we're entering a crisis, we can do the same thing for our supporters. Have this on your computer, on your phone, in the notes section or something, so that you can list as part of your plan, send them the crisis plan. I can't tell you how many supporters want to help, but you came up with this plan maybe weeks, months, years before the crisis. And how many people are going to lay their hands on your crisis plan that you gave to them at that time? So part of the crisis plan is get people up to speed that as we're heading into crisis, here's the plan. Make sure that it's easily accessible to you. And then we get it off to that person again so they can review it. And they've got all the information, the phone numbers, everything that they agreed to. Because sometimes if it's been, weeks, months, or years, somebody who committed to something can no longer do that. And that's when we got to start doing some revision on the fly.
And I keep thinking that if I was going to support somebody in a crisis, I would want the opportunity to support them when those early warning signs are coming up, and to have someone say to me, or for me to be able to say to someone, you know what, I'm slipping. I'm getting some of my early warning signs, but I'm not at a point yet where I need to involve someone in keeping me from sliding down. But if a week or two from now, I've kept up this trend, then I would like to be able to say to somebody, hey, I'm not in crisis, but I'm closer than I want to be,
Yes.
And now is when I would like you to step in, because I like to, as I say, define my own rock bottom, right? I don't actually want to get into crisis before I contact somebody and say, I could use some help. I might need a break. I might need physically to be in a different place. I might need a couple of days off. I might need all kinds of things. And it'd be good to alert the people who are going to be supporting you, or you as a supporter, before the crisis.
Yes, that's good. That's better actually for everybody. So I'm really glad that you brought that. It's better for your supporter to not walk into, a full-blown crisis with no warning.
Yes.
And that can be a sign, if that's happening over and over, that you're not identifying what are your early warning signs, that you don't know what things are stressing you that would lead to breakdown. And so that's, again, taking the personal responsibility for you to learn yourself. What's going to lead to that means you can jump on that more quickly and pull people in way before crisis. And that can be hard for a lot of people, because they feel like, I should try to manage this by myself until I can't.
Right. That's my way. That's, yeah.
Yeah. Really try to challenge that part of your brain that's saying, I'm supposed to try to do this by myself until I can't. And we want to change that to, I want to try to do this by myself until I begin to see these early warning signs that suggest that I might not be able to at some point. Okay. That's when you actually pull in your supporters. Not at crisis. We might need to pull them in at crisis, but if we could prevent the crisis with that support, that's the goal. That's the ideal. That's what we really want to see.
Thank you. I really appreciate you lending your personal experience, having written RAP plans for yourself, as well as having helped clients with it. Mm-hmm. And that's why we took extra time, right? I just think that this is something, even if we don't write it down today, to have this start in our heads and just realize that this is just like preparing for a tornado, a hurricane, a flood, a fire, and we do those things without any shame. And we have to do this for ourselves the same way.
Again, depression's going to challenge you and make you think nobody cares, but filling out these RAP plans with a friend, a family member, neighbor, whoever it is that is like going to be one of your supporters, really begins to help you see that people actually really do want to help. They really do.
Nice. Thank you. And we will be back next week with a shorter and more traditional episode.
But please let us know your thoughts about if this is helpful to you.
And you can always do that on our website, givingvoicetodepression.com. And there's a little red record widget that you can just tap and record us a message.
We truly hope that our podcast brings a little more understanding, helps you better articulate and reflect on your own experience with depression, or better understand how to support someone else who is struggling.
If this episode has been of comfort or value to you, know that there are hundreds of others like it in our archive, which you can easily find at our website, givingvoicetodepression.com. And remember, if you're struggling, speak up, even if it's hard. If someone else is struggling, take the time to listen.